Have you ever carried a secret so beautiful that every time you looked at the person you loved, you almost told them, but instead you smiled and whispered to yourself, just a little longer? That's exactly where my story begins. Because today isn't about a surprise that changes one day. It's about a surprise that changes two lives forever. Leaped for as long as I can remember. I believe that love wasn't measured by the expensive gifts we buy or the grand promises we make. I believe love reveals itself in the quiet moments that nobody else notices. It's in the way someone remembers your favorite song without being reminded. It's in the way they ask if you've eaten after a long day. It's in the way they celebrate your smallest victories as if they were their own. When I met you, I didn't realize how deeply one person could change another. At first, I thought you were simply someone who made me smile. Then I realized you were becoming the person who made difficult days easier to survive. Little by little, without either of us noticing, my definition of happiness began changing. Happiness was no longer a destination somewhere in the future. It slowly became every ordinary moment I spent beside you. Ben's people often think love arrives with fireworks. Sometimes it doesn't. Ben, sometimes love quietly sits beside you, laughs with you over the smallest things, listens to your fears without judgment, and slowly becomes the safest place your heart has ever known. Fans, that's exactly what happened to me. You never tried to change who I was. Ben, you simply inspired me to become someone better, without asking, without demanding, without expecting anything in return. And that's one of the rarest gifts anyone can ever receive. There was something else I noticed as time passed. Landit, you never loved me only during my strongest moments. You stayed close during my weakest ones. And when I doubted myself, you reminded me what I was capable of. Millions, when life became overwhelming, you never made me feel like my struggles were a burden. And instead, you quietly stood beside me until I remembered how to stand on my own again. And that kind of love changes a person. It doesn't create dependence, it creates courage. And the longer we were together, the more I realized something important. Anyone can love someone during exciting seasons. Ben, real love reveals itself during ordinary days, when work becomes stressful, when plans unexpectedly change, when exhaustion replaces excitement, when silence becomes more common than celebration. Those ordinary moments quietly reveal whether two hearts are truly building a future together. And every ordinary day with you convinced me that I wasn't simply in love, I was home still. There was one thing I had been keeping inside my heart, not because I wanted to hide it, but because some surprises become even more meaningful when they're revealed at exactly the right moment. Aliens, every time we talked about the future, I smiled a little more than usual. You probably noticed, you probably wondered why. Mond, maybe you thought I was simply happy. The truth was, I was carrying a dream that grew bigger every single day. Beans, sometimes I'd look at you while you were talking and I'd almost tell you everything. I'd open my mouth. Bean, then I'd stop, not because I was afraid, because I wanted the moment to become unforgettable. Beans, have you ever prepared something beautiful for someone you love? Beans, if you have, then you understand how difficult it is to keep a wonderful secret. Then excitement has a way of escaping through your smile. There were days when you asked me what I was thinking about. It means I'd laugh and say nothing. I'd laugh and say nothing, but yet inside, everything was happening. I wasn't planning an ordinary surprise. I was planning something that represented every lesson we'd learned together, every obstacle we'd overcome, and every prayer we'd quietly whispered, every promise we'd protected, every dream we'd refused to abandon. Mullians, because the greatest surprises aren't expensive, they're meaningful. Anyone can spend money, not everyone can invest their heart. While preparing this surprise, I found myself thinking about the very beginning of our story. I remembered our first conversations. Then the awkward pauses, the unexpected laughter, the moments when we barely knew each other. It's amazing how strangers slowly become the people who know your heart better than anyone else. Life doesn't always announce its biggest blessings. Sometimes they enter quietly, one conversation, one act of kindness. Be one ordinary day, and years later, you realize that simple moment changed everything. Shambi, as I reflected on our journey, I also remembered every challenge we had faced. There were misunderstandings, laminde moments when we didn't immediately agree, days when life tested our patience. But something always brought us back together. Ben's respect. We never allowed temporary emotions to become permanent damage. We learned how to listen before reacting. Those lessons became the foundation of something much greater than romance. They became the foundation of trust, and trust is where every lasting love story begins. The surprise I was preparing wasn't meant to impress you. It was meant to honor you. Lan, to thank you for believing in me during seasons when I struggled to believe in myself. Ben, to thank you for choosing patience when life became difficult. Ben, to thank you for proving, day after day, that love isn't simply spoken. It's lived. Man, there was one evening that I'll never forget. We were sitting together watching the sunset. Baines, you were talking about your dreams with that familiar sparkle in your eyes. And you said something so simple that it stayed with me for weeks. Ooh, Mend, you said, the best surprises in life are the ones you never see coming. You smiled. Then continued talking. Mend, you had no idea that those words quietly became part of my plan. From that day forward, every detail mattered. Lance, every small preparation carried meaning. Every decision reminded me why this surprise couldn't be ordinary. Blend, because ordinary moments had already given me an extraordinary person. As the day grew closer, I became more nervous than I expected, not because I doubted what I was doing. Dumb Ben, because whenever your heart is involved, everything suddenly feels bigger. I checked every detail again and again. Menj, I imagined your reaction countless times. I wondered whether you'd laugh, whether you'd cry, or whether for just a few beautiful seconds words would completely disappear deep inside. I wasn't hoping for a perfect reaction. I was hoping for one genuine moment, a moment we'd remember for the rest of our lives, without realizing it. The day that would change everything had finally arrived. I woke up earlier than usual that morning, not because an alarm forced me to, because excitement refused to let me sleep any longer. For a few quiet moments, I simply sat on the edge of my bed, smiling to myself. I thought about everything that had brought us to this day, every conversation, every misunderstanding we had worked through, every prayer whispered in silence, every promise we had protected. It all felt like pieces of a puzzle that were finally coming together. I looked at the calendar. This wasn't just another date. Lands. This was the day my heart had been preparing for long before my hands started making plans. As I got ready, I kept reminding myself of something important. The surprise wasn't about creating a perfect moment. It was about expressing a perfect truth. That truth was simple. Menda, you had changed my life in ways you probably didn't even realize. Before you, I measured success by achievements. After you, I began measuring success by peace. Before you, I thought strength meant never needing anyone. After you, I learned that true strength also means allowing someone to stand beside you. Love didn't make me weaker. It didn't make me weaker. It made me braver. Every detail had been carefully arranged over the past several weeks. Not because I wanted something extravagant, because I wanted everything to reflect our story. The place where we'd laughed until our stomachs hurt. The path where we'd taken evening walks after difficult days. The little cafe where we spent hours talking without noticing the time. The park bench where we once promised that no matter what life brought us, would always remain stronger than anger. Those places weren't famous, they weren't luxurious, but they were ours. Memories give ordinary places extraordinary meaning. I arrived long before you did. As I waited, I watched people walking past. Some were holding hands. Some were sitting alone, some were rushing somewhere without looking up. It reminded me that every person carries a story invisible to everyone else. Someone was celebrating, someone was grieving. Someone was hoping, someone was quietly giving up. That's why kindness matters so much. We never truly know what another heart is carrying. Then I saw you, walking toward me with the same smile that had brightened countless difficult days. For a brief second, everything else disappeared. The noise, the people, the world around us, there was only you. Baines, you smiled and asked why I looked so nervous. I laughed. When I've been trying very hard to hide something from you, you raised an eyebrow. I knew it, I could tell. Bainda, you've been smiling differently for weeks. I couldn't help but laugh again. Even while keeping the surprise, you had already noticed my heart changing. We spent the next hour talking just as we always did. Nothing felt forced. Nothing felt rehearsed. Leans, that's one of the things I love most about us. We never needed perfect conversations. We simply needed honest ones. Then as the sun slowly began setting, I asked if we could take one more walk. You agreed without hesitation. And then step by step, we followed the same path where we'd shared so many memories before. And every few moments, I'd look, everything is going to change. Finally, we reached the place I'd chosen. You looked around slightly confused. Dan, this place feels familiar. It should, I answered softly. Mens, it's where I first realized I wanted every future memory to include you. For a moment, you said nothing. Memline, your eyes slowly filled with emotion. Before I could continue, you whispered, "You know, I've always loved this place." I smiled. I know. Benz, that's why we're here. I reached into my pocket, not immediately, slowly, carefully. Benza, my heart was beating so loudly that I wondered if you could actually hear it. Meaned I wasn't afraid of your answer. I already knew your heart. I was overwhelmed by the meaning of the moment. Banjan, because this wasn't simply about asking a question, it was about honoring every chapter that had led us here. Biendia, I looked into your eyes and realized something beautiful. Love isn't built in one unforgettable moment. Mendi, one unforgettable moment is built by thousands of ordinary moments that came before it. Then I spoke, not from memory, not from preparation, but directly from my heart. Show up. I've spent so much time thinking about how to surprise you that I almost forgot the only words that truly matter. Blends, you've been my peace during chaos, my courage during uncertainty, my safest place when life felt overwhelming. Beans, you've taught me that love isn't about finding someone perfect, and it's about finding someone who makes you want to become your very best. But I don't want another chapter without you in it. I don't want another dream that doesn't include your smile. Means I don't want another future unless we're building it together. As tears quietly rolled down your face, I continued. Genjian, so today I finally want to tell you the surprise I've been carrying inside my heart. The surprise isn't a gift, it isn't a vacation, it isn't something money could ever buy. The surprise, is that I want forever. I want every ordinary morning, every difficult season, every unexpected challenge, every celebration, every sunset. I want all of it with you. For a few beautiful seconds, neither of us spoke. Sometimes silence becomes the loudest expression of love. Then you commanded the kind of smile that says everything before words ever could. Very softly. You answered, I've been waiting to hear those words. The moment you said those words, it felt as though time itself had stopped. The wind was still, and the world around us continued moving, but neither of us noticed. There are moments in life that become permanent landmarks in your memory. You may forget the exact date. You may forget what you were wearing, but you'll never forget how your heart felt. That was one of those moments. I looked into your eyes, and for the first time, I wasn't imagining a future anymore. I was looking at it. Feng Yu gently took my hands and smiled through your tears. Then you said something I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. You know what the biggest surprise is? I shook my head. You smiled even wider. I thought I was the only one planning a surprise. I laughed, completely confused. What do you mean? You reached into your bag and pulled out a small envelope. I've been carrying this for weeks. My heart began racing again. You've been hiding something too? Hey, you nodded. Benda, I wanted to wait until the perfect moment. Slowly, you handed me the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. Not a long one, just a few pages, but every word carried more weight than anything money could ever buy. You had written about the first day we met, about the moments that slowly made you trust me. Lents about the days when you silently prayed that I would never stop being the man I had always tried to be. Banda. Then I reached the final page. It simply said, I don't need a perfect life. I don't need a perfect house. I don't need perfect circumstances. Gently you as long as I have someone who chooses me every day with honesty, respect, kindness, and faith. I'll always feel rich. By the time I finished reading, I couldn't hold back my tears, because I realized something extraordinary. Then the greatest surprise wasn't mine. The greatest surprise was discovering that while I had been planning a future with you, and you had been dreaming about the very same future with me. Then people often believe that true love is finding someone who thinks exactly like you. I don't believe that anymore. Then true love is finding someone whose values walk beside yours, even when your personalities are different. Then someone who doesn't complete your life because it was empty. Someone who joins your life because it's already filled with purpose. That evening, we stayed there until the stars appeared. We talked about everything, not only the exciting parts, bands, we talked about responsibilities, about supporting each other's dreams, Ling's about building a home where kindness would always speak louder than anger, a home where apologies would never be delayed by pride, a home where gratitude would become an everyday habit, and a home where future children, if we were blessed with them, would grow up watching two imperfect people choosing each other again and again. Jim, because that's what real love looks like. Not perfection, commitment, not endless excitement, consistent care, not dramatic promises. Daily faithfulness. Jane, as we walked back together, I realized the surprise that changed everything wasn't hidden inside a ring, a lever, a letter, or a carefully planned evening. Delene's, the real surprise was what love had quietly done to both of us over time. Man's, it had turned fear into confidence, waiting into gratitude, loneliness into purpose, two separate journeys into one shared destination. Standing here today, I don't tell you this story because every love story ends the same way. Being life doesn't always follow the ending we hope for. Some people are still waiting, some are healing. Then some have experienced heartbreaking loss, some are praying for a second chance. And if that's where you are today, I want you to know this. You might never stop believing in the kind of love that helps you become a better human being. Means never chase people who force you to beg for the bare minimum of respect. Never mistake attention for commitment. Laned, never confuse beautiful words with consistent actions. The person meant for your life won't simply make your heart race. Bands, they'll help your heart rest. They won't constantly make you question your worth. And they'll remind you of it. They won't ask you to abandon your values just to keep them. Lamjins, they'll admire you because of those values. And while you're waiting for that person, don't waste your waiting. Become the person you're praying to meet. Heal the wounds that don't belong in your future. Bands, forgive the people who no longer deserve space in your heart. Learn patience, protect your integrity, strengthen your character. Because love isn't only about finding the right partner, it's about becoming the right partner. One day, someone will walk into your life carrying dreams they've protected for years. Mons. When that happens, don't treat their heart carelessly. Honor it, protect it, be the safe place they prayed for. Because every heart you meet has survived battles you'll never fully understand. Jan, as I think back to that unforgettable day, I no longer remember the nervousness, I remember the peace, the certainty, the gratitude, and I understand now why I had called it a surprise that would change everything. Bounds, it wasn't because one question changed our future. Lean, it was because thousands of small choices had quietly prepared us for that one question. Every honest conversation. Domlands, every act of forgiveness, every sacrifice, every moment of patience, every decision to keep loving when life wasn't easy. Those were the real surprises. They slowly transformed two ordinary people into partners ready for an extraordinary life together. So if you're listening today, whether you're deeply in love, still searching, healing from heartbreak, or wondering if your story will ever change, don't lose hope. Geomanda's love isn't a race. It's a journey of becoming. Don't settle because you're afraid of waiting. Man, don't rush because the world tells you you're behind. Don't stop believing because yesterday disappointed you. The greatest chapters of your life are often written after the pages you almost gave up on. And when your moment finally arrives, when you look into the eyes of the person who brings peace to your soul, you'll realize that the biggest surprise was never the gift, it was never the plan, it was never even the question. The biggest surprise was discovering that, through every delay, every challenge, every unanswered prayer, and every season of Doc, life wasn't making you wait, it was making you ready, you know? And that's the kind of surprise that truly changes everything.